We are following a number of significant developments in the war with Iran, which is now stretching into its sixth week. Moments ago, President Trump once again reiterated his threat to devastate Iran if a deal is not reached before the deadline he set of 8 p.m. Eastern Time tonight. The President of the United States posting on social media, in part this: a whole civilization will die tonight, never to be brought back again. I don't want that to happen, but it probably will. Trump, however, is leaving the door open for a breakthrough, adding, maybe something revolutionary, wonderful can happen. Who knows? We will find out tonight. Trump has been threatening this level of devastation for weeks now, repeatedly delaying the attacks on critical infrastructure, like power plants and bridges, attacks that could amount to war crimes. But he suggested in that post, as well as yesterday to reporters, that this latest timeline, his latest deadline, is final.
This is a critical period. They have a period of, well, till tomorrow at 8 o'clock. I gave them an extension. They asked for an extension of 7 days, right? I said, Steve, give them 10 days. 10 days is up actually today, so I gave them 11, I guess, indirectly. I thought it was inappropriate the day after Easter. I want to be a nice person. They have till tomorrow. Now, we'll see what happens. I can tell you they're negotiating, we think, in good faith. We're going to find out. We're getting the help of some incredible countries that want this to be ended because it affects them also. A lot of people are affected by this. But we're giving them till tomorrow, 8 o'clock Eastern Time. And after that, they're going to have no bridges. They're going to have no power plants. Stone Ages, yeah. Stone Ages.
For its part, Iran says it would, quote, deprive the U.S. and its allies of the region's oil and gas for years if President Trump carries out that threat. Meanwhile, Iran this morning is already reporting a series of attacks on key infrastructure, saying airstrikes took out a railway bridge, a train station, and a highway bridge in cities across the country. Neither the U.S. or Israel immediately claimed responsibility for the strikes, but the IDF did earlier warn Iranians not to use trains. This comes as the U.S. conducted strikes on military targets on Karg Island. A U.S. official with direct knowledge of these events tells MS Now. This was not an oil infrastructure strike, the official stressed, describing the attack as restrikes on what the U.S. had previously hit. The attack occurred in the early morning overnight hours, East Coast time Tuesday, and we're now 11 hours from this deadline. Let's just repeat for a moment the President of the United States and his post this morning. That is threatening a war crime. That is threatening something genocidal if he follows through with this. And perhaps it's just a bluff. Perhaps it's a negotiating tactic, an 11th hour push to get the Iranians to the bargaining table. But even just issuing that threat from the Oval Office is a remarkable escalation and something we have never before seen from any president of the United States. With us, we have now MS Now senior national security reporter David Rohde, chief White House correspondent for the New York Times, Peter Baker, contributing writer to The Atlantic, Eugene Robinson, and contributing opinion writer for the New York Times, Molly Jong-Fast. Our thanks to all of you for being with us this morning. Peter Baker, I'll start with you about the president's post this morning. And we know he is, fond of over-the-top language. He is fond of, fire and fury threats and the like. But this, to me, is something entirely new. And even if it does prove to just be a bluff of some sort or a bargaining tactic, this is still a new place for a president of the United States. This is the rhetoric we associate with people like Vladimir Putin, with people like Kim Jong-un, with the monsters of history. And yet we have heard it now from the sitting president.
Yeah, absolutely right. He's using the language of war crimes in a way that no other American president, certainly in our lifetime, ever has. I mean, America traditionally has tried to occupy the high ground. When it comes to wars, wars are fought only out of necessity, not out of spite or out of, emotion or out of bombacity. And presidents, when they talk about war, talk about achieving military objectives, talk about, targeting military targets, not wiping out a civilization. Wiping out a civilization is the language of war crimes. And this is going to be, as you rightly say, you never know with Trump, right? Obviously, this could be just him chest thumping. He likes to do that. He likes to shock. He likes to threaten. He likes to look tough. He's almost 80 years old. He wants to look like a tough guy. But, it's a real test, I think, for the U.S. military at this point, because the U.S. military is bound by law not to follow illegal orders. War crimes, if that's what he ends up ordering, would be illegal. So this is what exactly those 6 Democratic members of Congress foreshadowed when they released that video a few months back, when they said that members of the military should remember that they are obligated under law to not follow illegal orders. They got punished, or tried to be punished, by the Trump administration for it. In fact, the Trump administration tried to literally prosecute them and throw them in prison for stating what the law says. And now, of course, that looks different in the context of what we're seeing today. And the question is, what will the military actually do when push comes to shove?
When leaders start speaking in absolutes, especially in the language of total destruction, something fundamental shifts in how power is exercised. It stops being about leverage and starts becoming about spectacle. The recent escalation in rhetoric, threatening the collapse of an entire civilization unless a deadline is met, doesn't just raise the stakes diplomatically, it redefines the boundaries of what is considered sayable and therefore potentially doable. At first glance, this kind of language can be dismissed as a negotiating tactic: strong words, dramatic deadlines, calculated pressure. But there is a difference between signaling strength and normalizing extremity. When the threat itself implies devastation on a scale that blurs into collective punishment, it introduces moral ambiguity that no strategic objective can easily justify. Even if no action follows, the precedent is set. And precedents matter. Global politics operates not just on actions, but on signals. When a leader openly flirts with ideas that resemble total annihilation, it reshapes expectations on all sides. Allies begin to question boundaries. Adversaries begin to prepare for worst-case scenarios. The space for measured response quietly disappears, replaced by fear-driven calculations. There is also a deeper contradiction at play. On one hand, the rhetoric suggests overwhelming dominance, the ability to reduce an opponent to nothing. On the other, it reveals a kind of impatience with the slow, frustrating nature of diplomacy. Deadlines become shorter, threats become louder, and complexity is reduced to a binary choice: comply or face destruction. But real-world conflicts rarely resolve within such rigid frames. Perhaps most concerning is how this kind of language interacts with systems that are supposed to impose restraint. Military institutions, legal frameworks, and international norms all exist to prevent the worst impulses from becoming reality. When rhetoric edges toward actions that could violate those norms, it places those systems under immense strain. It forces individuals within them to confront questions that should never arise so casually. In the end, the issue is not whether the threat is real or a bluff. It is that the line between the two is becoming increasingly difficult to distinguish. And in global conflict, uncertainty at that level is not a strategy, it is a risk multiplier.